Hello, everybody. How you doing? Thanks for showing up at my little session here. My name is Eric Johnson, and just finished a long career in television broadcasting, and 31 years in Seattle and Boise, Spokane, Portland before that. And I want to talk to you about the craft of telling stories, and I want this to apply to a whole range of platforms. I want you to be able to use some of these thoughts and practices in any form of communication that you embark upon. I'm a TV guy, but hopefully what I can tell you today will translate into print or radio or social media. I'm sure we're going to have future YouTubers here and podcasters and all that stuff. That's not my world, but the principles I'm going to talk about will translate into that world. We are, all of us, stories. We're all just a big long string of stories scotch taped together end to end. That's what our lives are. Our stories are who we were, things we did, who we will be, what we will become, experiences we will have. They're all stories. So you ask me about the meaning of life, I'll tell you a story. You ask me about the Roman Empire, I'll tell you a story. Stories are how we learn, they're how we teach, they're how we become interesting, they're what we tell strangers at parties. They're how we find boyfriends and girlfriends. We tell them our stories. You have to be good at telling stories in this life. And if you can master that craft, if you can harness the power of a well-told story, I promise you, you will be successful. I don't know what you're going to be successful in, but telling the story is such a huge part of being alive in this day and time. It doesn't, let's make a list of all the platforms. There's never been more platforms than there are now in the history of the world. Newscasts, podcasts, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, newspapers, magazines, television, radio, marketing, sales, advertising, video games. I just learned that video games that are places to tell stories. All of that, all of those things, what you do is you get on those platforms and you tell stories. So we're going to work on telling stories. Stories are what we have to offer to the world. It's what you have to offer to the world. So get good at it. We all have that crazy uncle or aunt at Thanksgiving that tells a great story, and you can't stop listening. And when they get the floor, it's like magic. And you're like, I don't know why, but Uncle Louie, man, when he starts telling stories, I got to listen, right? What is that thing that they have harnessed? What is that power that they have grabbed hold of? That's what I want to talk about. So we'll start with, what is a story? What is a story? I think an easier question would be, what isn't a story? There was a guy named David Johnson. Do I have that right? Yes. He wrote a column for the Lewiston Tribune, and he did it for the better part of 40 years. And what he did every week of those 40 years is he opened up the phone book and he rifled through the pages with his eyes closed, and he stopped, and then with his eyes closed, he pointed to a name, and then he would call that person on the telephone, and he would write his column about that person. He called it, Everybody Has a Story. And what he found out is that if you dig deep enough into any human being's life and their experiences and their stories, you will find something interesting. That later got picked up by CBS, and I think CBS did it for 7 or 8 years on a national basis. So it's fascinating. It's way more easier to answer the question, what's not a story, than what's a story. What makes a story is how you present it. part of that is conviction. I think I'm going to play you a couple stories here, and if nothing else, even if you don't like the stories, I think you'll notice that I have conviction about this story. I'm taking you along on this ride, and I dare you not to be interested. I believe in this story. And so we've all been in those situations where you have a story you're going to tell in a social situation, and you're kind of not sure about it, and you kind of tell the story. Like, people can smell fear a mile away. And if they sense that you do not have conviction about the story you're telling them in any situation, a podcast, a newscast, anything, they will not go along with you. They won't buy into it. They'll like, nah, that wasn't funny, right? So the process of telling a story, there are several little things. One of them is an arc of information, an arc of emotion, right? I want you to pay attention to that when I show you the story, and then we're going to break it down. The order of information is hugely important. So my wife has this habit. I'll start telling a story in a group of people, and she gets so excited because she knows what story I'm going to tell, and she'll jump in and throw in a piece of information before it was supposed to be revealed. She ruins the story because the story has to line up in a certain way for it to be effective. I'm leaving breadcrumbs. When you watch this, I am leaving breadcrumbs, and it's all leading up to a series of moments. I'm revealing things when I want to reveal them to you. And I want you to pay attention to that as we watch this. So this story is called The Frugal Man. We're going to watch it, and then I want to break it down with you. So pay attention to how it's laid out, and then I'll ask you some questions. And let me also say, throughout this process here in the next hour, if you have a question, just throw it out. I'm an open book. I'd love chatting with you guys. I get energized by you and your enthusiasm. So any questions, be sure to throw them out. This is a story called, can we turn the lights out? Does that work? If we can. This is The Frugal Man. This is the story of a frugal man, a decent, thrifty man who led an understated, dignified life. Alan Naiman was raised in the Maple Leaf neighborhood. He graduated from Blanchette High School in 1972. Eventually, he became friends with Mary Monahan.
Alan lived a very simple life. He didn't spend a lot of money. He always brought his lunch. He never went out for coffee.
He met Linda Ahern in '78. They became close friends. She says he was Joe Blow. Regular guy?
Absolutely a regular guy. You would not know him if he was walking down the street.
For a time, he worked at Seafirst Bank, where he met Shashi Karan.
He sounds, by all accounts, like a regular guy. Regular guy.
But he found his true calling in social work at DSHS.
Very social, just a little bit more reserved and private about himself.
It's where he befriended Susan Madsen. He made $67,000 a year, quietly, modestly.
He didn't need to be in the spotlight. He shied away from that kind of recognition.
Alan liked cars, could talk on the phone for hours, loved telling a good story. And he could stretch a buck until it screamed for mercy.
Yes, he was very, very frugal.
And it is, legendary, his thrift. But it wasn't a sacrifice. It was a game to him.
Why should I wash my clothes in warm water when Consumer Reports said it's just as well in cold, and I save myself the money there?
Stories abound.
He got furious if you washed his coffee cup because you were wasting water.
He'd work on all the holidays, like July 4th. So he'd get his, double time or whatever.
He wore everyday clothes. I don't think he got them from Value Village, but he might have.
Yeah, he was a regular at Value Village.
He'd go to Fred Meyer after like 8 o'clock when everything was marked out, you know, all the groceries and stuff were marked out and you could get things.
Would you call him a tightwad?
No. And the reason I wouldn't call him a tightwad is because he was generous.
He lived in this home in Lake City, alone. He never married, never had children. But from this home, he was involved in the Big Brother organization. He housed a foster child for a time, and he worked with children's charities, quietly, modestly.
He told me not to say anything when he was alive, but he felt unfairly dismissed from their position. He gave them the money for attorney's fees to fight this, what he considered an unfair dismissal.
And then in 2017, they told him he had cancer, that he had 2 years to live, and he felt cheated when it became obvious he wouldn't make it the 2 years. 1 year ago this month, he passed away in his home. Alan was 63 years old. And then something incredible happened.
Well, when the phone call came in, we were stunned.
In his will, Alan Naiman, a frugal man, left $425,000 to a charity called West Side Baby. Nancy Woodland is the director.
And then there was a little screaming and crying and jumping around and a lot of tears.
And he also left money to an organization called Treehouse.
I was totally blown away. And it came in an email. And we saw the amount that he had left and how did this happen? Where did this come from?
Treehouse provides for kids from the foster care system. Jessica Ross was amazed at the total.
About $900,000.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
And there was more, so much more.
I just couldn't believe my eyes. I just couldn't believe this happened to us.
Pediatric interim care tends to babies who've been exposed to drugs. Alan left Barbara Drennan's organization $2.3 million.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I just feel so fortunate that we're able to honor him. And we'll honor him for many years to come.
And the list went on and on. In all, he left to a variety of children's charities $11 million.
I was stunned.
And that was very shocking.
You were good friends, but you didn't know he had $11 million.
No, I did not.
Only Shashi Karan, the executor of his will, knew how much money Alan had socked away.
He used to tell me, Shash, some of these charities, the amount of money I'm going to give them is going to be more than their annual budget, you know, and he says that's going to blow them away.
I think that Alan really lived a life where he was of service to people. That's how he felt he could do the most good.
The whole time, this frugal man, this decent, thrifty man who led an understated, dignified life, had a surprise. He saved it for the last, quietly, modestly.
He said, I lived my life with getting up every day trying to do some small thing that made the world better. And that was Alan. And he didn't need anyone to know.
So that was the frugal man. Let me ask you a question. What did I not have to work with when I did that story? Pictures and videos of him. Even more importantly, I didn't get to talk to him. I didn't get to know Alan, so I couldn't let him teach you who he was, right? So what I did have to work, and what I do when I tell a story, in any form, what do I have to work with? I've got some old photos, right? I've got some pictures of when he's a child. I have his friends. I can talk to his friends. Normally, I would only talk to 1 or 2 friends, but because I don't get to hear from Alan, I talk to 7 or 8 friends, right? You look at what tools you have to work with, and then you start laying out things in an order. What did you think about him? How did he make you feel? Just before you found out about the money, how did you feel about him? Anyone? Yeah.
Well, even before you find out about the money, you do get a good impression of him from hearing from all his friends and people who were doing that. He was a normal guy. He had such a positive impact still on a lot of people.
Decent, right? Decent guy. He's not rich. He's not living the high life. Yeah.
Just found out that he was just like happy with who he was. He wasn't really like trying to do anything. Right. Trying to box out his.
Right. And he had $11 million. He could have been high on the hog, man. He could have been letting people know. He could have made donations while he was alive to get all the thanks and praise, right? What do you think was the emotional arc of this story? Where did things change? Where did things change? Yeah. When he passed away? Yeah. So he passed away. He died. So that's one reveal in the story. And the music changed. That's right. That's right. I'm using what I have to take you down the path I want to take you down. I would argue that it really changed when he gave $400,000 to that first one, and you're like, holy crap, right? And I was watching you guys as that came up. Oh my God, wow, that guy? Now, why did you feel that way? What breadcrumbs had I left you along the way? Yeah. Yeah. And you saw his house. How would you describe his house? Simple, right? You know that phrase, the devil is in the details. What details did I give you?
Didn't you say he earned $67,000?
I gave you his salary. And so when you hear that he made $67,000, $68,000 a year, you're like, wow. You know, that's not a lot. It's not a lot, but he seems happy, right? Yes.
When you said like he loved cars, the car looked like kind of nice.
Yeah. I know, yes. And actually, that's so funny you say that, because as I was watching, I think, I maybe should have not used that picture of the car because it was a new car. He did treat himself to a new car. What other details? Yeah. Saved hot water. Was worried about that. How about the one, and I don't know if you could hear it right, where the woman says he'd get mad if you washed your coffee cup because you're just going to put more coffee in it, right? So now we have this picture. I've painted a picture of this guy. What if I started the story with, his name is Alan Naiman, and he left $11 million to children's charities. Let me tell you about him. What's wrong with that? I've told the whole story. So what I did there was I led you down this path. I taught you about this man, told you how much money he made, told you how frugal he was. Then we lower the boom. But here's what's cool about what I love about this story. Okay, he left $400,000 to this charity. Wow. And then what happened? We went to the next charity and it was $2 million. And then the next charity. And you're like, wow. And then at the end, 11. So I'm taking the emotional arc of the story, right? And I'm ramping it up until you realize he gave $11 million. But then what do we do then? You don't end a story on the emotional peak. You bring it back down to the ground. Why would I do that? You wrap up the story, and the way you wrap up the story, from my experience, is you make it human, right? You bring humanity into it. So now I have his friends saying, I had no idea he had that kind of money. So now you know what kind of a human being this is. Yes?
Kind of brought it back to like the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll use repetition. So you open the story with modesty.
Yeah. How many times did I may have overdone it on the word frugal. I don't know. That's up for debate. But when I say he's a frugal man at the beginning of the story, you're like, okay, he's a frugal man. When I say it at the end of the story, now you know what it means, right? And now I'm a very musical guy. How many of you have heard the song Bridge Over Troubled Water? Simon and Garfunkel, please, for God's sake, if you haven't heard this song. But the thing about this song is it starts out and it's Art Garfunkel, this beautiful voice of his, and it reaches this peak moment, the bridge over trouble, and he's got this massive voice and it's just big. And you think that's the peak of the story. You think that's the emotional peak of the song. How could it get any bigger? But then, like 30 seconds later, after you think it's peaked, this other thing happens where for the first time, it's Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel singing together in harmony this line, Sail On Silver Girl. So what they've done is sort of what I tried to do with this story is I give you a peak, I keep going up higher, I keep going up higher, and then I surprise you with $11 million, and then the song comes back down to earth. So those are just some of the things to think about, to work on. What did this man's story make you feel like? I think that's so important to ask yourself. If you're telling a funny story, why is it funny? You're telling a story like this, why is it important? How did he make you feel? Anybody? You just watched 6 minutes of this guy. Yes.
Like I could do so much more with
Yes.
myself.
Yes.
Like he had such like a, he got $67,000 salary. Like he didn't have much, but he led his life with such intention. And when he was diagnosed with cancer, he obviously knew he could have donated all this money, but he purposely waited until he had passed away to
How about that?
break that.
He's humbling, wouldn't you say? He's humbling. He makes you think. It made me feel silly, this guy. The stuff I care about, the stuff I'm worried about, this guy's the real deal. So that's that story. And I have another one, and the thing they both have in common is that I couldn't interview the main principal in either of the stories. And it's because the principal in this story is a tree. This is a story about a tree. And my challenge was to make a story about a tree interesting, to make it feel important, to make you feel something when you watch it. So this is called the Tree of Life. It's a tree on the west coast of Washington. Have any of you ever heard of it? You've heard of it? So you probably know what this story is about. But just be thinking about, okay, what did he have to work with? What is he doing here? Pay attention to the words. What is he doing with his words? What is he trying to make me feel?
On the outermost edge of the state of Washington, out on the Olympic Peninsula, is a coarse and raw place, unforgiving. The rain comes in sheets, the wind wallops and wails. The sea batters the coast with a watery fist that never tires. To survive here is no easy thing for any living thing. There are bluffs along ruggedly beautiful Claylock Beach, and on the bluffs are trees that have weathered bitter storms for hundreds of years. But on one bluff, there is one Sitka spruce that is special. From the beach, down below its canopy, there is a story to be told, a story of survival. This is no tree. This is a metaphor for life.
It makes me think about life and how we really are just hanging by a thread.
It is very powerful. It's a very powerful symbol and a beautiful illustration of what nature can do with and without our help, right?
Nobody knows how old it is, how long it's been straddling like this. It has come to be known in these parts as the Tree of Life.
Somehow it surmounted a lot of the obstacles that may have been here before it, and it has, outlasted them.
I mean, for me, a little bit of hope, right? That no matter how tough things can get, and sort of how you're, sort of the typical things that you depend on in life might not be there, you can still get through it.
There is a waterfall behind it, and with the frontal assault of the tides, its foundation is under attack from front and back. Each storm could be its last.
I think it's touching. I think it's a reminder that things that we think are permanent are transient, and we can't really rely on anything to stay the same for quite too long.
This is Matthew Nichols. He's a local who so admires the plight of the tree of life that he has taken to documenting it.
You know, every year I prepare myself that it's going to come down. Every year I think this winter's the winter, but it continues to surprise me, and I'll just accept it surprising me every year.
He's there every couple of weeks, taking his pictures, hoping that the inevitable doesn't happen, knowing that in the end, it will. His photos dazzle. They speak to a profound mystery that the tree seems to know the answer to. They make us ponder and reflect and feel small.
You know, to me it symbolizes the ability to go on, you know. No matter what's thrown at it, it continues to thrive.
Tourists come here now, attracted by the tree's quest for immortality. Down the road a ways, Lissy Andros is with the Chamber of Commerce for the city of Forks.
We tell people that to see the tree of life, that it's a tree that's basically on the bluff and its roots are exposed and we don't know how it's staying alive. I'm going to be super sad when it's not here anymore, but it could outlive me. I don't know.
It's like a high-wire artist doing the splits over certain death below. Some of its roots cling desperately to sandstone and clay. Others dangle helplessly, straining and grasping for terra firma. The big ones, old and time-tested, seemingly levitate, gnarled and twisted, dancing above the fray. Day after day, the tree, nearly adrift, but hardwired to survive, strives to exist. It clings to life. That's what we do, isn't it? We cling to life.
It is symbolic of life, right? You go through different phases in your life, and sometimes you're hanging by a thread, just like this tree is. But it survives.
It's had a hard life, it looks like, but it's hanging in there, and it's doing the best it can with what it has to work with.
I'm happy that it's living, and I'm going to be optimistic that it's going to be around for quite a while longer.
But for now, it's a joy. It's beautiful, and it's nature kind of at its best.
And so this mirror on the beach endures, untethered but grounding us, reflecting back to us how precious life is, how life persists until it can't anymore. And somehow it lives. Against all odds, against the laws of gravity and nature, it lives. And for now anyway, for people like Matthew Nichols, who is drawn to it again and again, and countless others, it inspires and somehow teaches. Because the tree of life story is all of our stories. This is no tree. This is a metaphor for life.
Why did I call it a mirror on the beach? Can anyone answer that? Yeah. Right. That's a thing that I thought was important in that story, is to give it a humanity. It's just a tree, but I gave it human qualities. Can you think of any of the human qualities I gave it? Hanging on, right? Resilience, yes. Matt.
High-wire artist doing the splits.
Above certain death, with certain death below. Yeah. So I turned this thing into almost human qualities. I'm trying to get you, the listener, the podcast listener, the television viewer, the radio, it doesn't matter, to think about your own humanity as reflected by this miracle that's happening on this bluff. This is an open-ended one, but what do you think was the emotional arc? Was there a place in this story that you thought was the emotional peak, the point in the story where you're like, yeah. Yeah.
It's like, this is something that's been meaningful year after year. Yeah.
It wouldn't have worked to bring Matthew in at the very beginning. Look at these photos this man takes of a tree on the beach, right? The timing of everything. And you're in control of that as the storyteller at a party, on the air. You're in control of the release of information, right? Yes?
I was going to say, like, you start off with, like, how hard the environment is, and then you show that there is one person that shows up at almost, what was it?
Twice a month, yeah, something like that.
That has appreciation for life, even when it's at its so-called worst or close to death.
And because of his appreciation, you start to appreciate it. You see it through his eyes, through his camera lens, right? There was a phrase I used twice, again, same as the earlier story. Do you remember what it was? Yes, sir?
This is not a tree, this is a metaphor for life.
Yeah. The first time I said it, you probably thought, that's a bit of a stretch. The second time I said it, I hope it was a punch to the gut, right? I set you up. A good boxer sets up his biggest punch. He waits for the exact right moment. That was the exact right moment to say those words a second time because now they mean something. Enrique.
Talk a little bit about
Yeah,
you know, visuals, setting up the scene, how you go about doing that.
The less the visuals, the better the writing has to be, I would say, first off. I've only got pictures and video of a tree, inanimate object. I better write the hell out of this story, is the way I thought. I need to write the hell out of this, but it's got to be good. When you're comparing a tree to human life, you better nail it because your failure could be massive. My process for writing, I always say, it's easy to write when you're inspired. It's hard to write when you're not. But writing when you're not inspired is what makes you a professional or doing anything else in life. Inspiration comes and goes, and you tap into it when you can, but you have to learn how to fight through a lack of inspiration and find something to be inspired by, to create to. You know, you can work on your writing, and the best way to work on your writing is to work on your reading. And believe me, my daughter came through here. I cannot get her to read books. I've tried. I swear to God, I've tried so hard. So I understand your generation, it's a struggle. You've got, your books are competing with a lot more immediate and fun things for your time and attention. But if you can teach yourself to read the right way, and I'll tell you what that means, I swear to God, it will help you so much in everything we talked about. Everything we talked about. Number one, when you feel something, you're reading and you feel something, I got in the habit of saying, why did I feel that? What did they do? What breadcrumbs were left that made me feel something? Now I go back 2 pages or 10 pages or 100 pages. Oh, that's what he did, or what she did. They left that breadcrumb so that when they dropped that little bomb on me later on, I would feel something. It's mathematical. It's musical. It's all of those things. But I'm a careful reader now because I'm trying to break the code. I'm trying to find the power of the story within the writing of the words. So I beg you, read quality things and figure out the genius. Figure out what they're doing to manipulate me and make me feel what they want me to feel. Yes?
Question, was this story assigned
I searched it out, and it nagged at me for a couple years. The first time I saw a picture of the tree, I thought, oh my God, that's kind of amazing. And it might have been one of Matthew's pictures. I'd have to go clear out there. How would I do that story? But somewhere, I feel like somewhere in the back of my little pea brain, for 2 years, it was working on me. And then one day I'm like, I want to do a story about that tree. But by then I had sort of figured out somehow, maybe when I'm asleep or something, how I would go about it. And for me, the key was giving it human qualities. Once I figured that out, now I can work backwards, bring that in when I want to. Yeah.
What kind of research do you do to figure out, like, how far do you dig in?
This was a feel story. Listen, important stories need research and dedicated research and thought and time. This was a feel story. I didn't do that much research. I talked to all the people you saw me talk to. It's a tree. That story tells itself, right? I just needed to help it tell itself. But some stories, you know, you spend countless hours digging in and you don't want to get it wrong. You know, I did a documentary actually about Tyler Helinski, the quarterback here at Wazoo that you're also familiar with. I couldn't get that wrong. Like, I mean, I'm talking about suicide. So I can't get any of this information wrong. That wasn't a feel story. That was an informational story that had feeling to it. So that I approach them differently. You know, different kind of stories I approach differently. Sometimes I'm just going for the heart, and sometimes I'm going for the brain, and sometimes both. Keith.
Two-part question. What writers inspire you? And then secondly, who taught you how to write?
I think, well, what writers inspire me? You know, I was going to mention to you guys, how many of you know who John Steinbeck is? Okay. Endings to stories are so important. And the ending to the book, Grapes of Wrath, is like, oh my God, right? Incredible ending, incredible writer. So he inspired me. I read a guy named James Jones who wrote From Here to Eternity, which is my favorite novel. And for whatever reason, I latched onto that guy. There's a guy named Cormac McCarthy. Any of you guys know who that is? Yeah, you're a reader then. Amazing. So just, you know, I grabbed, but you have to want to grab onto that stuff. It's not going to do it for you. You have to seek it out, find good writing. You know, ask people, give me a book, you know, what was great about it? So that, and how did I learn how to write? I don't know. Careful reading. Being obsessed with the written word, you know, being obsessed with stories. My dad was a fireman, and I would hang out at the fire station, and these guys would tell these stories. Like, to this day, like the best storytellers I've ever met were these firemen sitting around bullshitting after their shift, right? And I would just sit there and listen. Amazing, just amazing stuff. And they had figured out naturally the emotional arc and when to bring in information. And I would just sit and listen to them. So it's all a mishmash. Bill.
Eric, because the theme is curiosity and you're a very curious dude, how do you weed out? What's your process that this is not that curious to me? I don't think my viewers would be that interested in this topic or story.
You know, I have a simple answer for that, and it's not as good as an answer as you would hope for. Countless stories. Joan Kinsey was one of my producers, and she would say, how about this story? There's a woman with a cat in Enumclaw, and blah, blah, blah. And I would literally immediately go, how would I tell that story? And if something doesn't pop into my mind within about 30 seconds, I'm like, I don't like it. But the tree story popped into my mind, and I let it ruminate for 2 years, right? So you never know. I just instantaneously, I just go, nope, don't like it. And might be a great story, but I can't tell it. And it gets back to that conviction. If I don't believe it's a story, then it's not a story, at least for me. It might be for you. So, yeah, and I'm just going to open it up now, continue for questions, you guys. I just love hearing what you think and what you're trying to do. And yes.
I'm wondering if what book or recommendations would you give to college students?
Okay, I just read one of the greatest books I've ever read in my life. I'm so happy someone asked. And I want you to write this down, and I want you to read this book. It's called Stoner. It's by a guy named John Williams. It's not the stoner you're thinking. So I started. It was written in 1964. Nobody cared about it. Didn't get reviews. It was no big deal. Someone published it in like 2010, and someone from the New York Times got a hold of it and said, this is the perfect novel. This is a masterpiece. And so it has taken on this whole other life. So that's one I would throw out. I mean, I don't know, it's pretty heavy, but it's brilliant and simple. When something simple can just knock you out, that's genius, right? Yes, Matt.
A process question and broadcast specific, because you talk about writing. Your voice was 25% of the Tree of Life story right there. So you're writing around these interviews. And so I want to ask you, because you elicited some interesting responses in that first story, The Frugal Man. How do you get people to tell you that he saved hot water by not wanting to wash the mugs? My lesson here as a teacher is the writing process sometimes takes place while you're asking people the questions.
You're absolutely correct.
So how do you wrap your head around that?
My method, and everyone has a different method, my method is to make them as comfortable as possible. My method is to be as comfortable as I can be. My trick is to get them to forget about the camera, that the camera doesn't exist. And that's a hard thing to get someone who is nervous to do. So once you work on that, hey, I'm just a guy, we're just chatting. I always tell people I'm going to throw out about 90% of this, right? So that sort of lessens their nervousness. Every stumble, I always tell them, if you stumble, just start over again. You know, it's not a big deal. So once you get to that place, now it's just a conversation. Don't write questions down. I would say, except, you know, listen, I got the opportunity to interview President Obama. I wrote the questions down, right? I mean, but when you're trying to elicit some human responses, don't be a reporter looking at your notes. Listen, and then ask a question. Be curious. That's the theme of this thing. Be curious. I'm curious about this guy. What? He asked you not to wash out your coffee cup? What? You know, and then, if you think that's funny, here's another one. Next thing you know, they're on a roll. Is that what you were asking? How to get?
Exactly what I was asking.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people might forget, you know, our standard is ask the name of the dog, you know, ask those detailed questions.
Yeah.
To get to the heart of those little character bits.
Details make a beautiful story. You felt like you knew who that guy was because you saw his house, you knew how much money he made, and because he doesn't wash out his coffee cup.
When you're doing like those interviews like that, how, like you said, making them comfortable, how do you react to like some of those questions? You said like the coffee, like you react, but you just say,
yeah. If I would normally laugh, I laugh. If it would make me sad, it makes me sad. Like, you are just a person asking questions. You're not some entity. You're just a guy or a woman having a conversation. You know, that's all it is. It's that simple. My first interviews, when I got my first job, I had a little notebook and I had all this written down and I looked like an idiot, you know, So, what else? Back there with the camera.
What's the best interview you ever had?
Oh my God. That is so hard. Well, Lou Piniella, yeah, that was a good one. I wish I had one singular one. But I'll tell you this much. The best interviews happen in small towns. The best interviews happen with farmers and firemen and store owners and I mean, I've interviewed a lot of politicians and mega millionaires and rich, very rich people, and I'm not saying that they were bad interviews. I'm just saying the best stuff is when you get someone that's just living this life and wants to tell you about their life, and they're unguarded, you know, and they just let it all hang out. And it's rare, because we're all nervous about ending up on social media looking like a fool, right? But when you find that person that just lets it all hang out, that's when you get the gold. Hold it. This guy here, you had raised your hand a second ago. No? Yeah.
I was wondering, how important is personalization within your storytelling?
I'm sorry, one more time.
How important is personalization within your storytelling?
You mean me relating as a person?
Personalizing story, focusing on the character of the person in your storytelling.
Yeah, that's it. And that goes along with the details, right? I have to make you feel something about this person before we reach that emotional arc. Before we reach the peak, I got to make you care. If you don't care about at A, then you're not going to, sure as hell not going to care at B. So I need to make you care, or at least be interested, or at least understand this subject. Yeah. Who else? Back there in the...
What's your timeline? What were your timelines like when you were making these stories? Whether you set those deadlines yourself or they were given to you, and how did you adjust your process?
These aired weekly, so I would... they were not assigned to me. These were never... So these are separate from my regular reporting and my regular anchoring. So I would do one story a week. We did 340 of them. Every week. It's really hard to do. And so I would shoot the story on, say, a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday. I would write on Friday. We would edit on Monday, and they would air on Tuesday, or sort of like that. You get into this rhythm, you know, and sometimes you're working on 2 or 3 at a time. Yeah. Anything else?
Quick observation. I really enjoyed this presentation because you're in a bunch of students who are news writers. First come out with the information, the first paragraph or so, and you taught us to bury the lead.
Well, okay, good point, fair point. If this was a newspaper article about the tree, or better yet, about Alan Neiman, the frugal man, if it was a newspaper story, it would say, Alan Neiman, who passed away 2 months ago, left $11.3 million to a variety of charities, and then it would break it down into different. That's exactly right. That's the newspaper model. I don't like that, personally. And newspaper feature writers would do it more like I did it, maybe. Or a magazine article would be more like I did it. But you're right. In a regular newspaper article, boom, the headline, boom, the facts, and they might get some detail stuff later on at the end of the article. It's fascinating, yeah. But that's the way I do it, yes.
What would you say is the story that you're most proud of and why?
Oh, God. I did a documentary called Seattle is Dying, which was very controversial. I took a lot of crap for it, and that's what I'm the proudest of. Because I told the truth. And so look it up. It's on YouTube. It's been seen 40 million times or some crazy thing. But I'm very proud of that. But scared the hell out of me for a while, I'll tell you. So, okay, any more? I'll tell you what, I'll just stick around here if there's anyone else want to ask questions, because I think, is it time? Okay, you guys are thank you so much for asking questions. Awesome. I know you had one more, so we'll get to it. Thank you very, very much.